rarely see it mentioned that you're a repeat founder. You co-founded an app that at one point, before Substack, at one point had 300 million registered users. These are the numbers I saw. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's yeah. I'd love to hear your take on this, but the stat I saw was 40% of U.S. teenagers were using Kick Messenger at one point. Live now.
There we go. I can see some people trickling in.
Chris, I think your app is functional. This is good.
It's working.
Yeah.
Despite what you might suspect from our phone verification snafu of 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, that might be user error. We'll give it that. So yeah, I guess in a minute, I'll do a little intro and explain the the reason for being here, and then we'll kick it off. It's probably like a 20-minute thing.
Great. That sounds great to me.
Yeah.
This must be your first time going live on Substack.
This is my first time going live on Substack. I'm a power user of the product otherwise, but
all right. Well, you'll have to give me feedback. Let me know how it goes. Tell me if the clips it makes are any good.
Yeah.
We're working on those things right now.
Yeah, we're gonna play with it and edit, how it looks and that sort of stuff. I've watched a few. They're very fun, very informal. Hello, emojis in the chat. We love to see it. All right. Well, you want to kick it off? Let's do it.
Let's go.
All right. So, hello, Chris. Yeah, welcome to your app, Chris Best. Thanks for making it. Hi, everybody in the chat. This is not Chris Best's first time doing a Substack live. I'm pretty sure, but it is my first time. I'm Ryan Rigney. I work for a16z. I'm a marketing partner on speedrun. For anyone that doesn't know, that's a startup program for early stage startups. So the idea behind this live today is that we're going to talk to a founder here. This is a founder and CEO, Chris Best, founded Substack along with at least one other company that you might have heard of. And really, we just want to ask some questions. What I would love for this to feel like is if it feels like the audience is getting an office hour session with you, Chris.
Oh, sweet.
Especially, so our audience, for anyone that doesn't know, I write the a16z speedrun Substack. We got like 90,000 subscribers, a lot of founders on the list, a lot of potential founders on the list, investors, folks like that. And we're trying to our strategy, such as it is for Substack, is to create content that's like useful for those people, hopefully useful for founders, potential founders, and investors. So that's the sort of questions I want to ask you. So if it's cool, I'll just kick it off.
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. So you've had a little growth recently. The line's been going up, including new fundraising. You've announced earlier this year there were some big milestones with paid subscriptions and things like that. I'm curious for you and your journey with Substack specifically, as you look back at like the inflection points. What were the ones that really were the most meaningful, that you felt like, oh, here's a moment where like the trajectory of this company has changed?
Well, I'll tell you something that is maybe not obvious about those moments for us, because I think some people recognize them from the outside. Like the app this year has been a clear moment where I've had a lot of people tell me, "Hey, man, you've got wow, this app is suddenly blowing up. Like, what a crazy overnight success. What a clear inflection point."
Right.
And with a lot of the ones that are, I think, at least in my experience at Substack, the ones that have been the most meaningful have been times where we had a clear theory of something very important but difficult that we had to do, that we set out to sort of work on relentlessly for years. And then eventually you kind of hit a breakthrough and it starts to work. And so, taking the Substack app as an example, we've been working on this thing for 3+ years now, building it bit by bit. We shipped the notes feed over 2 years ago, got in a big fight with we just had this whole long, painful, like we knew we had to do a thing. We knew that if we wanted to make this economic engine for culture and that we actually wanted to help our customers grow and be able to like meaningfully compete and exist in a world of internet scale networks, like we had to build our own internet scale network to help them. And that's just like a really hard thing to do. And we've been grinding for years to do it. And then late last year, we had, a couple pieces started to come together. We got the feed algorithm kind of working. We got a push notification strategy really working. There were sort of a few different bits where you can kind of look back and see this massive inflection point. Um, and so it would be tempting to go back and say, oh, this is kind of like the one thing, this one weird trick that we figured out.
Right.
But in my experience, what usually happens is you know something is important to do, you grind at it for years. In retrospect, there's like one or two weird tricks that wind up working, but there's not necessarily a way to like cheat and get there faster.
Yeah.
If there is, tell me. I wish I knew.
But it almost sounds like was there a decision to do notes? Like, is that maybe the inflection point? Like that, like the choice to go down that path?
Yeah, I would say maybe if, like I think that's one of the a big that is a big pivotal moment in the company, right? Deciding, hey, we are not just going to be if we are only a tool that lets people publish, but we are not a network that helps them grow. Um, at the end of the day, like I think from the very start of the company, we knew that was always embedded in what we were doing.
Mhm.
And then, I guess 3+ years ago, we sort of were like, okay, that means we want to have this destination that people can come to that has all these rules. So yeah, I think the decision was an inflection point, but the decision was like years before the inflection point where it started to work.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Okay. So we love repeat founders. We love first time founders, but we love repeat founders as well. I like rarely see it mentioned that you're a repeat founder. You co-founded an app that at one point before Substack at one point had 300 million registered users. These are the numbers I saw. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's yeah, I'd love to hear your take on this, but the stat I saw was 40% of US teenagers were using Kick Messenger at one point. So,
Yeah. It's
I
funny. We're hiring people now who are like, oh yeah, I used that thing when I was a teenager. I'm like, oh God, I'm so old.
that rules. Yeah, you're kind of, you're coming in Substack is like second generation, kind of, communication app compared to that. That's funny. So, but I don't wanna make you go down memory lane too far, but I am curious, like, have there been challenging moments, as chief executive of Substack where you felt like that experience on Kick, really better prepared you for what it is you were facing?
Yeah, I think one thing I learned from that experience was just the power of compounding growth. And, I think everybody who does a startup needs to work against the intuitive deficit that most people have of like, what does exponential growth mean and how valuable is it? And what does that mean for the long run? And then I think if you pair that with something you learn as you do this, which is that the highs are never as high as you think. And the lows, although they may be they may be as low as you think, like you have the option to kind of push through and keep going. If the thing that you if the ultimate thing you believe in, you still believe in it. There is a pretty big return, I think, to being willing to believe in it over a period of years, sometimes before or even after the outside world believes in it, and just being consistent in it and investing in that, like keep the growth ticking, keep the thing going. Um, I think I learned from my experience in ways that helped me at Substack.
Yeah, that makes sense. So another something we see that especially first time founders, but everybody worries about is competitors. So I want to ask you a little bit about that. You said something interesting on another Substack live. I watched the one with Eric Newcomer, and you mentioned that you sort of see who your competitors are as changing as Substack itself evolves. I mean, you specifically said like it's more like big platforms like YouTube, right, versus
Yeah.
their email newsletter delivery services. So I'm curious, like, what does that mean though in terms of its actual impact on you, like your strategy, your ambition? What does it mean to sort of change your perceived competitor?
Well, I'll tell you, we actually haven't changed our perceived competitor. If you asked me, 7 or 8 years ago in my heart of hearts, like, what is this actually competing against? I would have said the big world scale networks. Like that's the thing that we're setting out to build. That's why this stuff matters. Um, and I think we're the thing that's changed in the past 6 months or whatever is I say that to people and they don't laugh at me as hard as they used to. Um, And so I think, the way that I always talk to the team about this is, we should let our competitors influence our speed, but not our direction, which is a little bit it's not quite, because you wanna be able to learn from your competitors.
Yeah.
I would say that the most important thing though is, like, have conviction about the game that you're playing or the race that you wanna run, and then take whatever energy and lessons you get from competition and apply them to running the race that you wanna run, and don't get tricked into running somebody else's race just because they're competing with you or they seem hot or people are paying attention to them. Um, and I think for us focusing on, in the long run, this thing we're building is competing with YouTube, uh, sets us up to focus on the things that really matter, right? Are we delivering are we making a network that delivers massive value to the
Yep.
people on it? Are we building tools that span every type of media you wanna make? Like, it helps us dial kind of the ambition appropriately.
Right. I'm super curious, like, when it comes to ambition, this is something I've been thinking about recently with the difficulty that, people with Substacks have with conceiving of what it is that they're doing. So, like, some this isn't true for everyone, right? Like, you can just say, "Oh, I use Substack to send my newsletter," right? Or I'm blogging, right? It's sort of like you can have a very, simple idea of what you're using Substack for, and that's fine. But I think there are others, and I've seen you speak about Substack creators in this way that are approaching it as if they're founding a media company, and I find that really interesting. And so, to the extent that that's true, that Substack is a place where you can found a media company. What are the biggest challenges that you see media founders writ large facing today?
Yeah. I mean, as an aside, before I answer that, I think it's kind of interesting the extent to which people that are founding software companies are actually kind of implicitly founding media companies these days, insofar as your ability to capture people's attention, your ability to tell a story, your ability to be relevant and to matter is one of the most important sort of pieces of the game you play, even if you're making a product. I think maybe the lessons go beyond just what is it as a media founder, but, one of the ultimate thing I think faces people who see themselves as media founders is you're massively dependent on a whole set of networks that don't necessarily have your interests at heart.
Mm,
And so when you're building on X or Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube, you don't have ownership over your connection with your audience.
mm,
You, to varying degrees, don't have a way to make real money doing the work you believe in, which in the creative fields means often you can't afford to take a creative risk, right? You don't have this audience that's kind of signed up to take a bit of a leap with you. And so you wind up stuck kind of like producing for the algorithm to such an extent that you can't actually like make something original or make the thing you really want.
mm.
And so I think having a place where you are in charge but is also at the same time plugged into an internet scale network, that helps you grow is maybe the valuable thing I see Substack as being able to bring to people.
Do you have advice for people that are thinking about using Substack to build a media company?
I'll give you my most important advice, which is always just start. I think the most common failure mode that I see is people creating an extensive plan about what they're gonna do or thinking about it and getting in their own way, and it's not that that can never work, but very, very often. And this is like companies. This is like startups too, to some extent. At some point, you just gotta go. You just gotta start doing it. And that's figuring it out while you're going is easier and better than trying to like plan it in the abstract. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Okay, that makes great sense. So on the topic of advice, uh, I'm curious about investor advice that you've gotten. That not doesn't have to be from anyone in a particular round or any specific person, but curious, like, what's the best advice you've ever gotten from an investor, and what advice are you glad you ignored?
I think the best advice that I've got has usually been around you know, what's the most important thing right now? And are we doing it? What's holding us back from the most important thing? And there's been a few moments. I mean, one that sort of leaps out to me in retrospect. We've always been relatively slow to hire. I'm a big believer in the idea that you want to stay lean and sort of talent dense, and many more startups fail by hiring too quickly than fail by hiring too slowly. But after we raised our Series A, uh, we were at a point where we'd taken that probably too far, and I remember this moment really clearly where kind of Jay and I looked at each other, like we were gonna go hire some engineers, and my co-founder and CTO, Jay, and I looked at each other and we were like, "Oh, like, how are we gonna have time to go do these interviews while, we keep the servers up?"
Mm,
And it was like, "Oh, that's bad." And I talked to I think Mark used a memorable phrase in some conversation we had at the time where he said, "Oh, you guys are gonna be too hungry to eat."
mm.
And I was like, "Oh, fuck," like, that's true. Oh god. And so we sort of corrected. So I think there's been a few moments like that where it's you kinda get into this mode of, like, pretty simple, like, what are you trying to do? If you play the movie forward, what's gonna be in your way? And, like, are you seriously fixing that? Is
Yeah,
the kind that I found really valuable. Maybe the it's a truism, but I found it to be very true on what's not valuable is trust the no, but don't trust the reason. Uh,
mm,
Over the years, people who have not wanted to invest in Substack have had every reason under the sun for not wanting to, and I kinda just, like I don't update very much on the reason. If somebody the nature of these kinds of things is you're trying to do something kind of ambitious and non-obvious, and, you know, you're right or you're not, and
yeah,
people either see it or they don't, and if they don't, it's the people who do see it, those are the people whose advice you wanna take.
right. Is some of that, like, inspired by, the reason they're giving you might not even be the real reason, right? So it's not like you're gonna win them over if you update in their direction. Is that part of your thinking on that?
Well, I mean, yeah, so first of all, it might not even be the real reason.
Right,
Um, and it's usually not, and usually it's just like, "Hey, this didn't actually impress me enough, and now I'm gonna say something that, like, helps us both save face," and I don't there's
right,
no interest in somebody who's passing, like, make like, being bluntly honest with you because it's like they wanna preserve their reputation. They're not even gonna tell you necessarily what they really think, and
right,
also, even if they did, who the fuck cares what they think? Like, if they're the ones that don't if they're not if they don't see the thing and they're like they're all I just think it's not likely that trying to be like, "Oh, what if we were different in a way that would have persuaded you?" Um, I don't think that that's usually gonna work.
right. Great. So we're gonna keep this one quick. We're gonna keep it to like 20-ish minutes. So I'll ask you one more, which is just less about stuff that more you as a founder, you as someone who repeat founder. uh you're leaving the early stage, I would say, at this point. You're on your way out of it, but I'm curious. You have a good deal of experience going through the pain, the struggle of building early stage startups. So what are I kind of want to I'd love it if you could leave us with advice for early stage startups, either something they should be paying attention to, you know any word you would give them.
Any word you would give them. I went to a conversation I'll never forget. I went to a startup accelerator in, Waterloo, Ontario, because I was Kick was in Waterloo, it was in Canada,
Yeah,
and
great
there
school.
was, like, a bunch of, like, bright-eyed, young founders doing their thing, and one of them asked me very earnestly, they were like, "Oh, like, you're the founder of a big successful company," which, was Kick to them at the time. She asked, "So when did it get easier for you?" Right? Like, I assume that now
Yes.
that you're there, like, it got easier. So, like, when did it stop feeling like it feels for me right now? And I had to tell him, I was like, "It doesn't. It doesn't get easier. It gets harder. It gets more intense. It gets more exciting. It gets, but it's sort of like the the struggle continues if you're lucky, I think. If you're succeeding, if you're on the path to success, if you're making something that matters,
Mhm.
the struggle is part of it. And if you're predicating your goals on, hey, if I just get to that next milestone or if I just get to that next thing, it's gonna all feel great. It's not. You have to be you have to enjoy the struggle,
That's
and
beautiful.
it's worth doing.
Awesome. All right, Chris, thank you again so much for doing this. We'll let you go. And for everybody in the comments, thank you so much for joining. I saw some were joining throughout. We'll save the whole VOD. We'll share the clips, the whole thing with folks afterwards. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thanks.